Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, and we have reached week one. Yes, week one. The real games are about to start, and I have a special guest with me today to talk about Giants Commanders Sunday, 1 o'clock. He will be the voice that you hear Sunday when you flick on this game. It is none other than my friend Kevin Burkhardt from Fox Sports. He is also now known as Tom Brady's partner, the other guy. But KB, it's not your first time on All In, but we appreciate you giving me a couple of minutes this week. I know it's crazy.
Great to see you, Art. As always, buddy, football is back. Can't wait. Year two with Tom. It's like, do we even have a summer? It always just blends in, So, but I love it, man. This is like Christmas time for me. You know that.
Well, for you, I mean, come on. You spend your summers with A-Rod and Derek Jeter and Big Papi, and then you go to the regular season, and now you're with the greatest of all time in the NFL with Tom Brady. I mean, it wasn't too far ago where you'd spend your Friday afternoons in a very small radio booth in Pompton Lakes, New Jersey with me talking high school football. So
the point is I've always been next to stars. That's the idea.
Right.
No, man, you're the best. You've been on this beat. You cover it as well as anyone. So it's a pleasure to be here, talk a little Giants. Obviously, my roots are in Jersey. My family's still there. So, I have a lot of family eyeballs on this game on Sunday.
Absolutely. So let's get to it. I mean, since you took over that number one seat in the number one booth, your games with the Giants have been few and far between. Normally the games you get to call are because of the team that the Giants are playing. I mean, I know you got Thanksgiving a couple years, the last couple in the Brian Dable regime, based on, look, Giants Cowboys did such an unbelievable number in 2023 that it was, hey, let's put them back out there again to see what we can do. So tell me a little bit about, what you think and what the perception versus reality is of the Giants going into this season from things that you've started to pick up going into the year.
Well, I think, in some ways it feels like that 2022 wild card win was, 10 minutes ago. And then in some ways it feels like it was 10 years ago, right? I mean, because you felt like the organization was on an uptick. And then obviously some decisions were made based off that game that, that didn't work out. And so now, to me, being a neutral observer and just diving into all this, it's a reset, right? And it's a reset with the same leadership in charge, which I think they deserve another chance. And I think they're better, look, and you could say, well, you get 3 wins. You can't go much lower than that. But I think they're better. I think they made a lot of good improvements to the team. I think Russell Wilson is the perfect choice with a young quarterback in tow. And I don't think you need to or want to rush Jackson Dart. I get it as a fan. You always want to see the young kid play, right? That's always going to be the case. But I think Russell Wilson brings a lot to this team. I think he brings a much needed leadership at the position. I think he makes the offensive line better because of his processing and decision making. And quite honestly, I think he's someone for the young guys on this team to follow. And that's important. So, I think we're in the era, Art, where everybody goes and let's play the young guy right away. And a lot of teams do it, and there's some successes, and some teams have to do it. I think if I'm the Giants, if I could let Jackson Dart sit as long as I can, and obviously that would require being, you would think, competitive in games, that would help. But I'd let him sit. I'd let him observe. I know he had a great preseason, but I think he's learning behind the right guy. So you start there. And then I do think, in my opinion, even though the preseason doesn't mean a thing, I think this preseason meant something to them. John Harbaugh of the Ravens always buys into the preseason in a big way. Like, they play hard. They win a lot of preseason games, most of them, as a matter of fact, because he believes in setting the culture. And I think in a team that hasn't won anything, in the last couple of years, that's looking to reset the culture by bringing in some of the vets that they did, I think the preseason was big for the Giants in winning games, in learning how to play together, in getting a positive vibe around the team going into the season. Now, season starts and their schedule's impossibly hard, which I don't understand how you could be a 3-win team and have the schedule they do. But I just like the direction and the vibe that they're going. And look, they have to continue that. They got to play well on Sunday, right? You can't come out and lay an egg because that all goes away, as you know, in one day. But I don't think they will. I think this is going to be a fun game in D.C.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the Giants last year in week 2 down in Landover, Jaden Daniels was the rookie, and, coming off of week 1, no one really knew, was he going to be a good passer? How is this going to materialize for the Commanders? And then obviously the Giants lose Graham Gano on the opening kickoff. Mm-hmm. They play the entire game without a kicker, and that was a decision that in hindsight, they should have looked at Murphy's Law and said, Gano was coming in with an injury. Even though it was a different injury, they would have had a kicker elevated. But they played that game close. I mean, both games for the Commanders and Giants last year were decided by a touchdown or less. So I agree with you. Let's talk a little bit more about Russ, because I do think I wrote a column that's posted on NorthJersey.com tomorrow just about the Russell Wilson era. And if you look at the Giants over the last couple of years, really going back to Eli, there was always this pipe dream, this fairy tale that Russell Wilson, the guy who's, spending spring training with the Yankees, and Sierra is from this area. Oh, wouldn't it be great to get Russell Wilson as a Giant quarterback? And what's funny is the timing. They say timing is everything. Well, timing is everything for Russ, because now all of a sudden he's the Giants quarterback. He wants to embrace everything that comes with being the Giants quarterback. He's courtside at the Knicks game. He's at the U.S. Open, all this stuff. And all Giants fans want to know is, okay, when's it going to be over so that we can get Jackson Dart in here? So it's an interesting dynamic for a super positive. It's all positivity for Russell. And as Darius Slayton said, I don't know if you heard it in the press conference, Kev, but it's something that I think you may want to look at in your broadcast. He said Russell Wilson is disgustingly consistent. He said he wakes up they walk in the building at 7 a.m. every day, and the guy's smiling and he's ready to go. He said you can see how some people might perceive that as phoniness, or the guy is fake. No one can be that consistent. No one can be that positive. But I think it's actually worked for the Giants, like you said earlier, and what they've brought to this table. So tell me a little bit about, from your perspective, Russell. I mean, we've now seen him cast aside by 3 different franchises, including the one that he won a Super Bowl with. Mm-hmm. What is your take on Russ? What are you seeing?
Well, I think that from the leadership part and from the positive part, he is the perfect guy for the Giants, and that part has never changed for him. And look, I think you look at last year, and he played really well. Unfortunately, the Steelers lost the last 5 games he played. And obviously his play wasn't as good in those games. And he didn't have a lot of weapons either. George Pickens was hurt. He didn't have a lot of guys to throw to. Look, is he the Russell Wilson that he was in Seattle when they were in the Super Bowls? No, because he doesn't have the running ability that he used to have, right? He still gets out of the pocket. He'll still be on the move. But he's not running for 900 yards anymore like he did there. So I think what you're getting is a professional who gets rid of the ball, who can still scramble a little bit and make some plays for you, and is going to be a great leader for the organization. And if you have enough pieces around him, you could win games, a la Pittsburgh did. With Denver, it just, I think Sean Payton came in, he wanted a certain thing. Russell Wilson wasn't it, and that was that. So I guess what I'm saying is sometimes just moving on to the young guy isn't always the best thing. And Jackson Dart looks great, and he's got a real chance to be the Giants franchise quarterback. But let him learn, obviously how to play, how to process, but how to lead. And I think that's why it's such a good thing. And, Russell Wilson's on a 1-year deal. He's trying to win. Look, Art, I'll say this. If you're the Giants, you mentioned going into, play the Commanders week 2 last year. They're the team you're patterning yourself after, right? They were a 4-win team 2 years ago. They drafted Jaden Daniels, and I'm not saying that Jackson is going to be Jaden Daniels. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Jaden Daniels is a superstar. But the point is, they brought in the young quarterback, and then they brought in a lot of veteran leadership just to try and elevate and get to that next level. Well, it was better than they even envisioned. They got to the NFC Championship game. And so now they've stabilized that core and added on to it what they can and kept their big pieces with the young quarterback. I think that's the team the Giants should be looking at the pattern with. Right? They brought in Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo and Russell Wilson and these guys who are proven veteran leaders to try and get to the next level. Now let's see if they can win some games, and then you could decide how you're going to build the plan from here on out. But I think that is the real goal of this organization this year. Of course, yes, you want to go to a Super Bowl, but let's be competitive and win games and be in the race. I think that's really what you're looking at.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I do think that we know how much Jackson Dart means to Brian Daboll. I mean, he's the Giants version of Josh Allen. That's what we're all going to talk about. The reality is that I think there's something about Russell Wilson that Daboll likes. And I think Russell Wilson affords Brian Daboll the opportunity to put a little extra into Jackson Dart. Last week in practice, Kev, there was a moment where they went into an individual period. Normally the quarterbacks are just basically throwing the staffers, waiting for other periods to break up so they can get into team drills. And Brian Daboll and Jackson Dart went into the end zone, the far end zone, while Jameis Winston, and he's another one who we can touch on a little bit, Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson stayed with Shea Tierney, their quarterback's coach, and just kind of loosened up. And Daboll was working with Dart one-on-one time. I mean, that is valuable for the rookie quarterback, because as we get into the regular season, they're going to have to steal those moments in practice to try to keep the development moving ahead for Jackson Dart. But I think because it's Russell Wilson, I think there are things that Brian Daboll can look at and just trust Russell Wilson to take care of and handle. And, again, every time last year gets brought up in quarterback history for the Giants, it becomes a slander fest on Daniel Jones. But the reality is that last year, Daniel Jones was so in his own head, so in his own game, trying to figure out what was going to happen, that he could not play the position the way the Giants needed him to play it. And I think that team suffered for it. Was he the only reason they won 3 games? No. But was he a big reason? Yes. So I agree with you as far as Russell goes. And look, negative plays are a big thing for this Giants team, Kev. I mean, if they come out on Sunday and all of a sudden start dropping the ball and getting interceptions and fumbling, they're going to go right back to where they were last year. And I think for the Commanders, and why don't you give me a little insight on the Commanders, because I always have this natural thing of, well, a team's going to take a step back. It's hard to do what they did last year, build it the way they did, get so close, and then come back and say, okay, we're going to snap our fingers, we're going to be back in the NFC title game. What have you seen? What's the vibe? I know nationally the vibe for the Commanders is very high. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And what do you like about what they're bringing back, maybe beyond Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's easy to say they're going to take a step back because they had an amazing season, right? I mean, Philly could take a step back, but I still think they're the best team in the NFC, So, I mean, it's hard with the schedule, and there's a lot of good teams in the NFC, I think, which makes it harder to do what you did. But I still think Washington's really good because I think the kid is a superstar. I think Daniels is just absolutely terrific. He's smart. He's got everything you need. He's got the tools, the running ability. He's accurate. So it starts there. But then, I think what I really like about them, again, I think their strategy changed the culture with Dan Quinn, right? And they brought in a lot of veteran leaders, good, solid players last year. And so after they had that success, they locked up the guys they had to, like Terry McLaurin. They made big moves. I mean, they traded for a franchise left tackle, Laramie Tunsil from Houston, and they moved their rookie Coleman to the inside now. They go get Deebo Samuel to give them another weapon, which, they didn't really have that kind of a guy for them. So now that adds a whole other value to their offense. And, they're one of the older teams in the league, but they've got the youngest guy at quarterback, and so they've got payroll flexibility, and so they're going for it, which I respect. I think it's great, so they're going to build around it and go and try and build this thing. I think they're really good. Defensively, we'll see. There's some questions for me in terms of, last year was certainly stopping the run, and they had some turnover there on the inside of that line, so we'll see what it looks like for them. They bring in Von Miller to replace Dante Fowler. Von could still rush the passer. We'll see. Fowler was pretty good for him. but I like some of the pieces they have. I think they've got a good secondary group. I think Mikey Samer still is a really, really good player. If Marshawn Lattimore can be what he was with New Orleans, he's been banged up for a few years now. He came over last year and he had some games which were lockdown games, and he had some others which were not really great games. But I don't see Washington all of a sudden not being a good team. I think they've got too much good personnel. I think they've got a star quarterback and a good coaching system and a good GM and Adam Peters, who has brought in some really good pieces. So, listen, getting back to the NFC Championship game is going to be hard in this division, this conference. But I think they're good, Art. There's no question about it. I'd be stunned if they don't win 10 games.
So I was thinking, thinking back for the Giants, I don't think there was this much anticipation for a rookie since I've been on the beat than Abdul Carter for the Giants in terms of, just where he was taken in the draft. And it's funny because I was thinking back, everyone wants to say, oh, well, what about Odell? Again, history lesson, Odell didn't play until Game 5, which was October 5th, 2014. And I know who was in the booth, and you know who was in the booth. It was the Atlanta Falcons, New York Giants at MetLife, and Kevin Burkhardt and John Lynch were in the booth calling Odell's first game as a Giant and scored his first touchdown. The Giants ended up winning that game against the Falcons. But it's kind of funny because I started doing some research about, okay, if Abdul Carter, what are we expecting from Abdul Carter? Because he was fantastic this summer. We know everybody has talked about what a special player he can be. I thought you'd find this interesting as I went back and I looked at every pass rusher that the Giants have had, and we know they've had some great ones.
Sure.
And what did they do? How long did it take them to get going? So I'll give you this real quick. Strahan, rookie season, inactive for the first 5 games. His first sack didn't come until October 17th. Justin Tuck, his first sack didn't come until December 4th of his rookie year. Osi Umenyiora, first sack, final game as a rookie. JPP, first sack, November 28th, 2010. I went all the way back to Carl Banks, October 14th, 1984, which is first sack.
That's pretty good.
It's kind of strange that for all the talent and all those guys, they're all in the Ring of Honor except for JPP, and I'm imagining at some point he will be in the Giants Ring of Honor. Where do we have the standard for Abdul Carter right now? Because I almost feel like, is it partly our fault for building him up to this level? But, it's rare for a guy to come out of the gates, being that superstar pass rusher. Javon Curse is the last guy for 14 and a half sacks is the rookie record in the NFL. So give me your take on what you've heard from Abdul Carter and how eager are you to see him kind of match up with Jaden Daniels?
I think the latest benchmark is Micah Parsons. That's a guy that came into the league and wrecked the league from day one. But your research is interesting, right? Just, saying sometimes it takes some time. And I think with this Giants line, I'm curious to see how they deploy them because they've got a heck of a front four. They really do. All right. Obviously, and they got edges with Thibodeau and Burns, who are really, really good. So, I don't know how they're going to use him. My gut is they'll use him a lot more on obvious pass situations, just kind of get his feet wet early, and we'll see. And what that rotation is with Brian Daboll and his guys. But look, he's obviously a superstar pass rusher with insane, freakish athletic ability. As you know, Art, like everybody looks great in the summer, right? It's like, oh man, everybody looks great in the summer. So I think he's got the ability to be absolutely special. And I think that line's got the ability to be absolutely special. The key is, and you know this, they just have to have the lead. I mean, they never had the lead last year. So, and obviously stay healthy, right? I mean, Dexter Lawrence obviously gets hurt last year with the elbow and he was having an amazing season. So I think if they stay healthy, if they can be in games, where they're in these games late and have a chance to win late and unleash that pass rush, I think it's going to be really good. And I'm curious what they do with Abdul Carter. So I think that'll be, to answer your question, how they use him may kind of tell you how quickly he'll have an impact, right? But,
yeah,
I think without knowing for sure, my guess is early on, especially this game, kind of rotate him in situationally, pass rush downs, get his feet wet. If he's playing well, play him more in the game, that type of thing, and then see how he responds.
I put my defensive coordinator hat on the other day, and I floated it out because I was watching the LSU game, and they were using their one of their linebackers in kind of a spy role, mirroring the quarterback. And with his off the ball experience, I kind of threw it out there, and I think it was a little misinterpreted. I went back and forth with Justin Pugh yesterday, and he said, "What?" Because I said I would use him off the ball a little bit. Let Thibodeau and Burns go after the quarterback. Use him off the ball because Jaden Daniels, when he breaks the containment and gets outside, that's when he was the most dangerous last year. I'd almost want to throw a different look and maybe something that they're not expecting as far as Washington on Sunday. I would play. When he's not out there strictly rushing the passer, I'd play him a little bit off the ball linebacker. Let him spy a little bit. Let him use his instincts. Follow Daniels around. I mean, sometimes, just go. If he's not taking off, just go. Get in the backfield. Go get him. It's a risky game, but you don't want Abdul Carter to be standing around the middle of the field. But I think they need to be more creative, like you mentioned.
Well, look, we'll see. Like, I think I'm curious to see. Like, and you don't really know until week 1 when they show you, right?
100%.
Like that's the reality. But to your point, like I was thinking about their, talking with Tom about their NASCAR package, their third down package and options they can do. They really don't have the obvious, a lot of these teams, when they have versatility, they mix an edge and they throw them, like Justin Tuck used to do, right?
Yep.
They throw them inside. I don't think the Giants really have that guy. Burns and Thibodeau are not inside players. So can I see using like Abdul Carter in an A-gap blitz type of situation, standing up, dropping back? Yeah, I can for sure. That's why I think these pass rush situations are going to be fun. If they're good enough to get into those positions on Sunday, exactly how they want to deploy that group. I just think they've got a chance to be monsters. And I hope that they are in these games and have these leads so they could pin their ears back, something which they could really never do. And Dexter Lawrence is going to get doubled every freaking time. And so that means that there's going to be some feeding opportunities available for these other guys.
Tell me your thoughts on Malik Neighbors year 2, because I think what's interesting is that with all the talk of the quarterbacks and of Abdul Carter, Malik didn't do much this summer. I think it was kind of a slow burn and simmering, waiting for week 1 to get to see his buddy Jaden Daniels again. And that game in Landover last year ended with Malik dropping the ball on the sideline, Giants driving for a potential go-ahead score.
Yeah.
Malik, for what he did last year with 4 different quarterbacks, none of whom are elite talent, that kind of thing. Tell me what you're thinking in terms of Malik Neighbors year 2, and do you get a sense that the league is almost just waiting for Neighbors to kind of take his game to another level, especially with a professional like Russell Wilson out there willing to get him the football?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much higher he can go. I mean, his season was amazing.
It's true.
All the points you just brought up with the different quarterback play, and it was sincerely incredible, and even more incredible in my eyes that the Giants didn't really have an option B in the pass game, right? So to me, that's what I want to see. I want to see how the rest of the offense plays out. Who's going to be the second option? Does Theo step up from a tight end position and become that really reliable guy in year 2? We know what Slayton can do, but can he do a little bit more? Does Wandale get back to the guy that was, before he tore his knee up, right? I mean, he caught a lot of balls last year, but they were all for a couple of yards. So I think if they can get the other portion of the offense going, I think Neighbors can I think he could have a 2,000-yard season. I really do, especially with Russell throw some deep balls, who Russell's the best at. So, of course, I'm fascinated to see what Neighbors can do. And I know that he and Russell Wilson have spent a lot of time together, which is cool. Yeah. So even though he hasn't been on the field, they have become close. And I think there's special things at bay. But I think one of the keys for the Giants is on offense, who else is it going to be? That's what I'm looking for. Like, who else are you going to, we give like the game summary in the third quarter. Here's what's happened so far.
Yeah.
Neighbors, and then who's the second and third line? I don't know the answer to that.
I'm interested to see what this running game looks like for the Giants, because if you're going to attack Washington, like you mentioned earlier, the idea of what they've lost up front, those, a couple of years ago, Washington was bad, but they were all about that defensive line, especially that interior. You didn't want to just knock your head against the wall against those two guys inside. Now, maybe it's a little different. Now you might want to challenge them a little bit inside. So Tyrone Tracy, can he have a big year? How much do we see Cam Scatterbo? Beginning of camp, Cam Scatterbo, it was the talk of camp, on the offensive side of the ball. He gets hurt. He has the hamstring. I think he's kind of laying in the weeds a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me to see him a little bit in the passing game against Washington. I think the big thing for the Giants is they have to show Washington something different than maybe they're anticipating, because I think what this offense was last year isn't what it's going to be this year. So, Kev, tell me a little bit. I know week one, we all talk about that, but week two, you have to be a little eager. You don't want to get too excited about week two, but you and Tom have a monster game that second week in the national window, don't you?
Yeah, week two, we get the Super Bowl rematch, Eagles-Chiefs, which is going to be pretty epic in Kansas City. And, we called the Super Bowl, so it's cool for us to do the rematch. But the other cool thing is, they've never had Super Bowl rematches so early in the year. They've always been a little bit later. So I think it's extra special that it's week two and it's fresh on everybody's mind. Everybody remembers the game that was just played, and we did the Super Bowl rematch 2 years ago, Chiefs 49ers, but it was like week 8 or whatever it was. And the 49ers were a mess. They were banged up injury wise. And so the game didn't have like the same pizzazz as it may have. This is week two. So, knock on wood, you keep everybody healthy. It's going to be awesome. It'll be in KC. And, look, I've been fortunate enough to call 2 Super Bowls for Fox. Eagles Chiefs has been both of them. So I'm looking forward to this one as well in Kansas City, where it's always a pretty cool atmosphere. So, yeah, that'll be great.
It's kind of funny because you prime that game up, and then the following week, the Chiefs come to MetLife for Sunday Night Football. It's the Giants' home opener. So I think the Giants, maybe week two, are rooting for Philly to beat up the Chiefs a little bit to kind of soften them up at least somewhat to come to MetLife.
Yeah.
I'll end with this, Kev. I mean, you've had a lot of great broadcast partners since you've been at Fox and everything you've done. I know my producer, Paul Wood, is a huge Mets fan, so your ties in this area go all the way back to your days with the Amazons and just that kind of thing. I mean, do you still, to this point, look over at the guy who's next to you? I mean, does he just become Tom your partner? I mean, when did that transition happen? Because the fact that you're the guy who has to toss to, like I said, the greatest of all time, somewhere along the line, you got to lose that, aura and just be your partner. Take me a little bit inside to that and what it's like to have Tom Brady as your broadcast partner.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. I've worked with so many awesome superstars at Fox, really, and every one of them has been so enjoyable to get to know, to work with. And I think it just goes with trust. So, do I look over and pinch myself still? I think is really what you're asking. Yeah, of course I do. I mean, I'm a kid from North Jersey who grew up a rabid sports fan, playing ball in the streets and yelling at the TV. So of course I do all the time. But the really cool thing is that, you build trust by building a relationship. And so just getting to spend it, and this goes for anyone, but certainly with Tom, just getting to spend the last few years, like before we went on the air, we spent a year together, just, getting to know each other, going to dinner, practicing, and you get to know each other and trust each other. And then for me, it's like just going to dinner and hearing stories. Like you almost wish you could share that stuff. It's so cool. But yeah, don't get me wrong. Like we're good friends now, and I love Tom, and he's my partner, and he's the best teammate. He treats everyone like absolute gold. It's obvious to see why he was such a winner. I mean, he's the ultimate teammate to our entire group. But, of course, there's games I'll look over. I'm like, it's Tom Brady, man, standing next to me. So it's just cool. That's the sports nerd in me, is that I get to work with all these, all these people and all these heroes that I looked up to, right? Whether it's, Tom or Greg Olson or John Lynch or Charles Davis, and obviously the baseball guys, Can you imagine 15-year-old me be like, oh, what are you doing in, 30, 40 years? I'm just hanging out with Derek Jeter and A-Rod and Big Papi. It's like, what? Makes no sense. But I can promise you this, I enjoy every second. I don't take a second of it for granted. I really don't.
As somebody who is, has gotten the chance to work with you and become a good friend of yours from the days of, Wayne Hills and Wayne Valley and going all the way up to this, I'm happy to say, and I know you don't say it, but Kevin Burkhardt belongs with all of the names that you're saying. And I think all of these guys who have now gone into their second careers into broadcasting, they do owe a lot to you because you make them look good. You are the point guard. I've talked to people about you as a broadcaster, and I think it's great. So I get excited anytime I get a chance to hear my guy KB on a Giants game, because even though I'm not listening to the game in the press box, I know every time I go back and watch it, or meeting up with you before the game, hanging out, it's been a while. So I'm glad to see you here week one with the Giants and Commanders, and obviously we're always rooting for you, and I'm rooting, at least if the Giants could win a little bit more, to get you and Tom Brady back doing games. Brady doing a Giants game. I don't know, Kev. I think you got to needle him a little bit on Sunday if they start playing well. Little fearful of Eli Manning if that comes up. We bust his chops all the time, and he's so great with it. Like the Eli stuff, we constantly bust his chops. I mean, when we were doing the Eagles, was it the championship game last year? I think we showed Nick Foles, who's in the house. I was like, Tom, you busting his chops on there, and he's so good with it. And the losses, obviously, he talks about the losses all the time. Like guys won 7 Super Bowls, and the losses like drive him nuts. But he's great. That's what I love about him, man. He's such a normal, great guy. He just happens to be the greatest player of all time. Yeah. You need to remind some Giants fans if they're watching that game, because they're going to be watching the broadcast, and every time Tom opens his mouth, it's going to be, oh, come on, it's Tom Brady. You're the kid from Jersey, so, you grow up, family full of Giants fans.
Tom and the Giants have a lot of history. He and Brian Dable go back a long way too. So, there's a lot of cool ties there. It'll be fun, man. It's just been a blast, and Art, feelings mutual about you, buddy. I love you.
Appreciate it, Kev. Thanks for joining All In. You're always all in with what we do and what you do, and we appreciate the audience as well. So that's Kevin Burkhardt, Sunday, 1:00 from that lovely palace in Landover, Maryland, formerly known as FedEx Field, now Northwest Stadium. Giants Commanders on Fox. Kevin Burkhardt, Tom Brady, Aaron Andrews have the call. Season's here. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Thanks to Kevin and obviously Paul Wood, our producer. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you after the game with our post-game analysis. All In live from Landover.